First thing we need to do is bed some beads in. We're going to bead it up and then we're going to base coat it. The beads that you're going to use are like this. They've got a mesh attached to them. Some fellas try and use the other beads, but ultimately this is what they specify you should be using. Corner beads look like this. The mesh goes over the outside of the corner bead. So if you get them, don't think, what the heck? I remember the first time I seen them, I was thinking, is someone having a laugh? But that's how they are, okay? You're going to base coat over the front of these and you won't have any bead left showing. That's how it is. We're going to bed the beads on. We're using FX4, and that is because we're going over these cement boards. Otherwise, we'd use another base coat, which is slightly nicer to use, but not as sticky. This stuff is basically like glue.
When you mix this base coat up, you want to mix it slightly wetter than what you'd initially think you need it. It needs to be fairly runny to be able to spread nice. I like to cut the beads as I go so that they fit nicely rather than cutting them all first. I use a cordless angle grinder with a tile disc in there. Now, I should have a guard on it really, but it gives the health and safety nerds something to give me stick about in the comments section. I find it easier to look down the blade without the guard being in the way, although that's not the right way of doing it really. When setting your beads out, I've got a lovely base rail to follow that these cement boards sit in, and I can just sit my bead above that. But if you're doing this on a brick wall, it might be easier to use a laser level or a chalk line or a split level. I would say the best bet for you is going to be a laser level. That'll be the easiest to use. When you're bedding your beads in, don't fill out all the way to the corners. You've still got another 2 coats to go on yet, so you don't want to be out too far. Just go up to the edge a little bit and just leave a bit of the bead showing. Just like that, see?
If your corners seem to open up a little bit, just tape them together till it sets. You don't really want gaps and stuff in it, you know. It's just neater, isn't it, if it's all stuck together. When you're working for the soffit, the regs say you need to leave a little shadow gap around the top so that this can expand and contract and it won't crumble the top of the render by pushing down on it. So you just leave a little shadow gap like that. I just use some window packers, and once the job's finished, you can go around with some silicone or some sealants and just finish that edge off. Same when you're working up to window frames and stuff. You just leave a little tiny shadow gap. Okay, so for some reason with these beads, every now and then this is going to happen to you. The mesh starts to bulge out even though the bead's straight. Why it does that, I have no idea, but it does. Now, that mesh is to stop the bead kicking forward and cracking here. So you never want to cut that mesh like that, because then it defeats the object. But if it's bulging out, yeah, just cut across the bulges like so, and then it'll trowel in. Just rub them down at your trowel, and that's it. The mesh is all in. Now, another thing we need to do, you might not need to do this if you're working on a brick building, fine. This needs to be meshed, but because we're working on cement boards, before we mesh it, we've got to put strips of mesh over every joint. A little side note for you as well, if you've got a window in every corner, it's classed as a stress point, so you need to put a nice big strip of mesh right across. I'm not talking like a little piece like this, I'm talking a big piece of mesh on every diagonal in each corner of the window. So these areas will all be double meshed, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm pre-cutting the mesh ready, so the drops are 220. We've got mesh on the beads either side, we've got to overlap that, so we're just going to go a little bit shorter and make these 200, and that'll be the right size.
I think it's a lot easier if you get all your mesh cut first, all to the right length, so then you can just concentrate on putting the base coat on and bedding the mesh into it. Now when you're applying the base coat, as you're going, you want to go so far. If you're on cement board, this is more important because it's quite high suction, and then you're going to run up it with a notched spatula, a 6mm notched spatula, and the purpose of that is to make sure that your base coat is the right thickness. You can easily see by the lines that it leaves that you're on thick enough, or if you're on too thick, you take off the excess and just pop it back in the bucket. Once you've bedded the mesh in, you then want to smooth over it with a nice big wide spatula, as flat as you can. You're trying to get this now as neat as possible, but be warned, the more you mess around with it, you'll start to make a mess. So just get over it quickly and get it as neat as you can, and then leave it.
It'd be nice to put the whole wall on and then give it a go with the notched spatula and then bed the mesh in. But on these cement boards, the stuff picks up quite quick. Like over here, we're going touch dry already, so it's just easier to just go one section at a time with the mesh. Okay, and then that now we can leave to go off. Now, you don't want it to go completely dry, but as soon as it's sort of firm dried up, we can get the next pass on it, and then that's what we're going to rub up. Just keep all your beads nice and clean, keep all your frames nice and clean. Now the spatulas I'm using for this is a 6mm notched spatula. You can get these from Refiner, just a nice big wide one. Now ultimately, try and just keep washing them off, because I'm not kidding you, this stuff sticks to everything and will just completely destroy your tools. So after every use, you'll see me just wash them off. Okay, this is touch dry now, so we're going to put another pass on it. Now at this point where the mesh is there, some guys have started rubbing this up with a float now, and that would embed the mesh a little bit and give you a nice smooth flat surface. Now, because we're following the spec on this job, we can't do that because that just leaves the mesh in the very, very surface of the render, and we want it in the top third. So we're going to put another tight coat over it, just following the specifications. Once that picks up and that's touch dry, then we'll rub that up, and then the mesh is fully encased in the base coat. Now this top pass, what you don't want to do, don't leave it too long, so that when you try and flatten it with the spatula, it starts to tear the surface. Now I've only gone that far, and I could go the whole wall, but we've got to mix more stuff up, so I've stopped there anyway. If I was in the sun or the wind, that's about as far as you want to go, because as soon as that starts getting the skin and you try and flatten it, the whole thing's going to tear. That's if you're using FX4 or anything sort of higher polymer is more prone to tearing. So what I like to do now is spat it both ways. I'm going to go across and up and down. Well, don't pull down, go up. That's about as flat as you need it to be able to rub up. No big lines, no misses, no hollows. And what we'll do is, as this begins to get touch dry, we're going to hit that with the sponge and a bit of water, and then give it a good trowel, and that'll come out lovely and flat. It'll almost be like a skimmed wall, but it won't be as smooth, you know. You just want it flat, no ridges in it. Things like this will potentially show through when you do the top coat, so that's what the next part of the process is going to do. Rubbing with a sponge and giving it one last trowel gets rid of all these ridges like this, you see. Okay, so now that's touch dry. I can rub it and leave a little mark in it. So we'll start rubbing it with a sponge. And all we're going to try and do bring up a little bit of fat to the surface. Once you get so far, you will have to keep dipping in the water. The water's the important bit with this. You're going to get it like this. All over the whole wall, and then we can give it a good trowel all over.
If it starts to drag the base coat, then you're getting on it too soon. Just leave it to set a little bit longer.
All we're doing is using the water just to lubricate the surface so that the trowel slides over it and flattens it in. You're not trying to polish it or anything, you're just trying to get rid of all the big lines to make sure the surface is nice and flat. Because don't forget, there's going to be another texture that goes over the top of this. We just want a nice flat solid base to work on. Okay, your corners, because you're not sort of working up to a nib of a bead, you've got a free hand them in. You just take them up both ways, like so, and then just make sure you work them. Just work away from the corner, like that.
And once you've got all that lovely and flat, you're then going to let it set. You're going to give it a couple of days to dry out, and then you're going to come back and put some primer on, like this, which is basically just like painting the wall. Don't miss anywhere. Make sure you're getting all the little nooks and crannies and cut in, and anything you get on the frames or the soffits, make sure you wipe off. You can tape it all up, but you're going to leave this to dry and you'll be coming back another day. So chances are all the stuff that you tape up will blow off. So I don't bother, I just wipe it up as I go. Some guys will let this dry and top coat it the same day, but I personally come back the next day and started the top coating then.
Okay, so we're about to start top coating. What we've done now is we've taped off all the windows and stuff. I'm going to show you why in a moment. But what you want to do is take your tub of top coat. We're using SF15, and you're going to put in a cup of water. 1 cup of water. Now people measure this out exactly. You can use a little measuring jug if you want. Just literally a coffee cup full of water, and then give it a good whisking up until it's nice and mixed, and then you're good to go. Okay, so if you're hand applying this stuff, this is how I usually do it. You're going to take your stuff. This is the only time I recommend using a flexi trowel, because it puts it on so much tighter. The idea of this is you want to get it on tight to the wall. You don't want it thick. So you're going to take it and then literally you're going to scrape it back off like so. Now you're going to go, I'm just showing you there the principles of it. The way I recommend doing it is take the shortest distance of the wall. So this wall is thinner than what it is long. So the way I would do this is I put a band down here, and then I'd move across and put a band down here, and I'll do it in bands, right? Because the thing is, you don't want a joint line. So if I went the long way like that, right halfway along the wall, by the time I've got back across the bottom, this joint line could potentially be starting to dry. So this is only a little wall, but I'm giving you the principles for when you do a full house, okay? So you're going to work in bands, and ideally you want 2 people. You want one putting it on and scraping it back as he goes in bands, and then you need another guy. He's going to take a float like this. Keep this wet. You always want this float wet. Now, whoever starts doing this, it really needs to be the same person that carries on with it, because the hand movement will change from person to person. And what you're going to do, now come here, come in a second. See when it starts clumping up like this? It's because you're getting too much. So you're going to take it off. And this will work better as long as you keep that clean. And that's basically it. You just work down in bands, quite simple like that. Always keeping a wet joint line. Now, today's a bit different for us because we've kindly been given a machine. So I'm going to scrape this back off now and show you a different way we're going to do it today for a bit of a change.
And this made life lots easier. So the beauty of using the machine is there's no rubbing with the float. The texture is done all in one application. You just spray it on. Now it's important to keep your hand moving. You can't see it so much here because I've sped it up, but you have to give your hand lots of little rotations, and that stops you getting any sort of patterns building up in the render.
And that makes life slightly easier. So the machine, actually, let me show you, is by Predator. And basically you just mix your stuff up, drop it in there and turn it on, and then that's the texture it leaves. So it's ultimately my first time using the machine. I've always done thin coat hand applied, and I must admit that is making life just a bit easier. It's a bit faster, definitely a bit faster. So anyway, we'll get this done and we'll show you the end product.
Now, I'm not joking, this was absolutely rapid. It took us longer to tape up than what it did to spray the whole extension. In fact, I timed this wall and it took me exactly 5.5 minutes to completely spray it. All the hand tools used in this job, the spatulas and sponges, were supplied by Refiner, and all the render used in this job was supplied by EcoRend, who, by the way, will happily give you a free spec for any job that you're doing. So regardless of what you're rendering over, you'll know exactly which of their materials to use and how to apply them. And that little shadow gap is just filled with sealant. I also want to give thanks to Fortress Windows and Conservatories for letting me do this demonstration on one of their extensions.
Smile, Reese. Give the thumbs up.
I've just managed to hit the 100,000 subscriber mark, so I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that subscribes to my channel and all you guys that watch my videos. You're the best. Cheers, and I'll see you on the next one.